else is welcome to join. But before we go there, I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Dr. Marc Cohen. Mark, are you there with us?
Yes. Hey, Brett. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, great. So Mark is an integrative medical doctor, a university professor, an author, poet, and entrepreneur, and speaker. And you've been a very active wellness trailblazer, and in particular, have been quite vocal in the presence of this COVID situation in identifying ways to increase health. I think that your topic of discussion is fostering a wellness culture to infect the world with good health. So thank you so much for joining us on the World Impact Forum, and we're looking forward to hearing your wisdom that you'd like to share.
Yeah, well, thank you, Brett. And I've just been listening this afternoon. I'm in Melbourne, Australia, so it's afternoon for me now. And I want to touch on a whole lot of topics that have been talked about. So I want to talk about the biosphere and the internet of value, and thinking big, and water, and tokenizing value. And I love to be an integrator, and I've got a little PowerPoint presentation I'd like to share. And I value that we've got extra time now to talk about it. So if I share my screen, is that going to work?
Yeah, you should be able to do that.
Okay. Now how do I get to? Okay, so I'm just going to give everyone a little bit of I guess orientation around myself. So I'm talking about creating a culture of wellness. So for me, there's been a discussion talking about, what is the why? Why are we doing this? Why do we create tokens? Why are we trying to save the environment? And for me, the why is about wellness. We want to live well, and I can't live well unless the whole world is well. Illness is about I, wellness is about we. And so for wellness is not something I have. Wellness is something that's embedded in the culture in which I exist, which is embedded in the biosphere which I exist. So how do we create worldwide wellness and leverage these exponential technologies, whether it's blockchain or crypto or AI and all these other technologies? That's what's really interesting to me. And I've spent the last 30 years as an integrative medicine doctor, and half of that time as a professor at a university. And I've done a lot of research. I've written over 100 peer-reviewed studies on all the areas of wellness that have no money behind them. So there's no big corporate industry behind them. So I've done papers on yoga and on breathing and meditation and herbs and nutrients, bathing, integrative medicine, lifestyle, on organic food, retreats, detoxification, home health hazards, a whole lot of areas of health and well-being that have major impact, but they don't have major industries behind them, even though they create enormous value. So after sharing like 100 peer-reviewed papers, and I've also written a lot of textbooks in these topics, and realized that it actually doesn't make that much difference. You write a peer-reviewed paper and you think, okay, you show organic food. After 1 week, you eat organic food and that reduces your pesticide load by 90%. You think that's going to change people's habits, but in the end, it doesn't. So I've started to branch out. I retired from academia a couple of years ago, from full-time academia at least. I've still got PhD students, and I've gone into the entrepreneurship world. And I've also written lots of textbooks. Now I'm starting to write children's books and poetry as summarizing a lot of the information that I've collected. So I'm quite well known of writing this herbs and natural supplements textbook, which is now in its 4th edition and 1,600 pages. That's like the basic textbook for all naturopaths and pharmacists in Australia for the last 20 years. Also wrote a textbook on the global spa industry, and I've done a lot of work in the wellness industry for the last probably 30 years. And in the high-end wellness industry, but also in the low end, because I love to integrate, the top end, the richest sort of people in the world with the poorest people in the world. And ultimately they need the same thing. So you really have to keep the poorest people in the world in mind all the time. But ultimately we all need to be well, and they're all connected. And wellness is valuable. I mean, the greatest wealth is health, but how do we account for it? And there's a saying that the currency of wellness is connection and direct human experience, but it's really hard to put a value on that. And the question I want to raise today is, how do we leverage the blockchain and crypto to foster a wellness culture that can infect the world with good health? And wellness can be contagious. So yeah, how do we account for it? So there is a global wellness economy. For 14 years, I was on the board of the Global Wellness Summit, and every year we do a big conference somewhere in the world. And this is the data we got for there was in about 2020 was about a $4.5 trillion market. This is how you account for wellness now in the traditional system, where it's based on tourism and beauty and healthcare and nutrition and physical activity and spas and retreats and complementary medicine, etc. So there is a wellness economy, but that doesn't actually represent human experience, our experience of being well. And I'm also really conscious that wellness can be just as contagious as illness, and that we actually infect others with our good health. And that both fear and courage are courageous, and they're sort of on opposite ends of the spectrum. Fear breeds in isolation, and when you're scared, you don't think well, your immune system goes down. These are all biological responses when you're isolated, and that follows the first law or the second law of thermodynamics, which says entropy increases in an isolated system. So when you become isolated, you become entropic, and health, wellness, evolution, growth, learning happens in an open system. So courage breeds in community. There's a saying that when pain is shared, it decreases. When joy is shared, it increases. But again, how do we put a value on that? How do we create a currency around that? And I think that's the challenge going forward, because currently what we value in terms of the currency isn't necessarily good for us or the planet. And I was contemplating this at the start of the pandemic, and because I've spent 30 years in, studying integrative medicine, I was putting together all the different activities that people could do at home with very little cost, training, or equipment. And in my, I sort of set myself a task of writing a list of all these things that would boost your immunity and reduce stress and anxiety. But they all had to be done at home with little cost, training, or equipment. And I came up with these 50 items. If you go to my website, you can actually click on each of these 50 items, and it links to the research behind each one. So these are all, this is an evidence-based poem here. I call it the World of Wellness, and it's how to go from wired and tired to chilled and fulfilled, or how to go from stressed and depressed to joyfully blessed. And I'll recite, we've got a bit of extra time, so I'll recite the poem. I call it the World of Wellness. So this is it. Hold someone's hand, gaze into their eyes. Walk barefoot in nature, bask in sunrise. Choose a dance partner and go find your groove. Do Tai Chi or yoga, mindfully move. Share a massage, enjoy healing touch. Focus on one thing and don't think too much. Make time for a hobby, play chess, fly a kite. Make use of your hands, draw, paint, sew, or write. Help someone in need, donate to a cause, play games, meditate, read stuff from bookstores. Turn off your screens and get a good sleep, declutter, spark joy, and love what you keep. Dig around in a garden, pick up a guitar, slip into a bathtub, sauna, or spa. Care for a pet, take up a sport. Go on vacation and make your home a resort. Lie in a hammock, release pent-up stress, relax and do nothing, and then do even less. Laugh out loud, share a joke, give someone a kiss, say a prayer, chant a mantra, and follow your bliss. So these 50 activities are all highly valued. They all create wellness. They all connect people. They can all be shared, but they're usually not valued. They actually require very little cost, training, or equipment. And I was thinking, how do we create a culture where these activities are the norm and that they are, well, they are supported. There's a whole song and a little cartoon that goes with that. I won't play. But when we're thinking about wellness, we need to get the basic things right. And I'm a big fan of permaculture. Bill Mollison was a role model for me. And he says, when you get the basic things right, other things tend to go right by themselves. And if you get the basic things wrong, it's very difficult to play catch up. And again, contemplating that, I came up with this recipe for wellness. What do you need to be well? So the recipe for wellness came out as another poem, which is bathe in beautiful water, prepare delicious food, make the most of every breath, dance through every mood. Tend the soil beneath your feet and embrace sunshine from above. Share your gifts with all the world and fill your life with love. Again, this is really basic, but how do we monetize that? Now, some of this is monetized in the hospitality industry, the spa industry, entertainment industry. But the challenge is, where do we start? And I really want to start with water. And the poem starts with bathe in beautiful water. And water is the most vital thing for all of life. Water carries consciousness. It's the matrix of life. It holds memory. It's inherently healing. It can be a blessing or a curse because water can contain toxicity and infection, but it is vital for life. And it's also rare and precious. And if you look at clean water on the earth, it's extremely rare and valuable asset that on the planet. And if Guy was talking about the first vision of the Earth and the astronauts. Now, if you look at the Earth from above, and if the Earth was the size of a basketball, then all the water on the Earth would be the size of just a ping pong ball. And that's because the water only covers the first 10 kilometers. The deepest oceans are only 10 kilometers deep, with the first 30,000 kilometers diameter. So, or circumference. So, if the Earth is a basketball, all the water on the Earth is a ping pong ball, but 96.5% of that salt water in the oceans. So all the fresh water on Earth would only be the size of a small marble. But most of that fresh water is actually in the ground or frozen in the ice caps. So all the liquid fresh water on the Earth, if the world was the size of a basketball, would be the size of a small mustard seed. So that little dot there is a representation of all the liquid fresh water on Earth. And that's an extremely rare resource. And if we know by the first law of thermodynamics that says the amount of water on Earth is fixed because you cannot create energy or matter, cannot be created or destroyed, just change from one to the other. And you can make water from the oxygen and hydrogen, but essentially that's fixed. And we know that pollution is always increasing due to the second law of thermodynamics. So to survive, we must continually regenerate, and the Earth's biosphere needs to continually regenerate clean water. And the question is, how do we incentivize the creation of clean water? Now, that happens biologically because we literally have a well in our being. For every glucose molecule we metabolize, we create 6 molecules of water. So we generate our own pure biological water. But we need to do that in our human processes. Otherwise, we're all going to just be living in the sewer planet. So I've created a business called Beautiful Water. And for me, Beautiful Water, it's a brand and it's a filter company, and I sell filters for domestic use mostly. But for me, Beautiful Water is filtered, structured, balanced, blessed, and free. And by that I mean it's filtered because you take the poisons out, because drinking less poison is good for you. And if you don't use a filter, you are a filter. Structured means that it's actually it's structured in a way that dissolves calcium crystals, so it actually improves cooking, cleaning, and plant growth. Balance means you balance the pH and minerals. Blessed means you put conscious intention into the water. And free means it doesn't cost any money, but it's also free flowing. You're not trapping it in tanks. Water does not want to be stagnant. And some of the business, or most of the business models I'm using, I've got products to sell, but I'll actually teach you how to do it yourself for free in your own environment. Might just take a little bit more work on your part, but all of these things you can do at home for free if you've got a bit of nous. So so the start is to bathe in beautiful water. So that's one huge thing that we need to consider, the water that we use, but also just bathing is often just underestimated. Yet bathing is the single most potent health intervention on Earth, bar none. Bathing in water is the cheapest, the simplest, and the most effective health intervention, and offers health benefits beyond any other pharmaceutical, vaccine, or any other medical technology. I mean, we can have global health without vaccines or the pharmaceutical industry. We cannot have global health unless everyone on Earth can bathe in clean water. That's just a given. And we know bathing is the key to wellness. So bathing practices are vital for preventing and controlling disease, maintaining human health, and maintaining dignity. And that social bathing integrates engineering, architecture, design, hospitality, therapy, and social activity to create a culture. And there's been some fantastic bathing cultures throughout human civilization. The Japanese have one, the Romans had one. And unless we have bathing as part of our culture, we're really not going to achieve global health. So how do we do that? Now, we know bathing can be profoundly therapeutic. So it's not just bathing to keep you clean and sanitary and for hygiene. bathing can provide intense relaxation where you can find homeostasis, where you actually find the balance and connect to our essence and actively do nothing. And then hot and cold bathing, where we go to the extremes of temperature, activates our immune system, builds cellular, physiological, and psychological resilience. And it allows us the experience of practicing being relaxed under stress, under physiological stress. So you go into a sauna or an ice bath, you're under life and death stress, because either being too hot or too cold for too long will kill you. So you can reproduce that stress in a very, very controlled way and practice coping with it and being relaxed with it and becoming resilient. So this is really profound therapeutic practices to do with bathing. And we know extreme bathing, where you go out into nature and swim in the ice, or will be actually the coolest thing you'll ever do. Literally, bathing in moving ice water strips the heat away from your body and requires a lot of resilience. And we also know that bathing is the most sustainable business model on earth. The oldest place-based business on earth, and there are two onsen in Japan that were started in the 1300s, which are the oldest place-based businesses. So that's a really sustainable business. I mean, one of those businesses was in the same family for 53 years, I think it was. I went to visit them in 2019. And actually the photo, I think, behind me in Zoom, I think I've got the photo on, is a photo of this oldest functional hot spring on earth. And it just changed hands. It was in the same family for 52 generations. They just sold it to a corporate group after, was it 700 years or something. So we know it's a sustainable business model, and it's essential to a culture of wellness. So when we socially bathe, we literally create a healthy culture. And that's not just a culture within how we practice and interact with each other. It's literally a culture of the biome in our body. When we bathe, we actually share our microbiome, and that actually is good for us. I know we're told to stand 2 feet apart or 6 feet apart or whatever it is and wash your hands and all that. That's actually not good for us. It's good for us to share a certain amount of healthy bacteria. It's really good for us, and we do that when we bathe, whether we like it or not. We also know that a wellness culture can be created through food and fermenting foods and the bacteria and yeast that have been used for thousands of years in sourdough and kefirs and kombuchas. And another company I've started off since retiring is literally our product is a starter culture. So we produce kombucha vinegars that are living probiotic vinegars. They're infused with organic leaves, roots, flowers, fruits, and fungi. And they can be sipped. You can put them into mineral water or straight water. That they're shelf stable. They don't need to be refrigerated because it's a vinegar. And you can use them as a salad dressing, or you can use them as a starter culture. You can feed them sweet tea and grow your own kombucha forever. And we encourage people to do that, and not even buy our product. We'll teach you how to grow your own kombucha, how to use the vinegar to infuse herbs through it and make your own medicines. And this is a new model where you can actually create your own cottage industry, brewing your own kombucha and making your own medicine at home, and being a fountain of infectious wellness for your community. And when you give out a kombucha SCOBY, or you're actually literally infecting someone with good health, that they can then reproduce that and keep it growing. So these ideas of creating a wellness culture that can keep spreading, I talk about wild wellness culture, because it's not a contained culture. You can do wild ferments, where you can just get the spores that are around and ferment your dough. We can do the same with the culture. And one of the key issues is finding the fun, to keep learning and having fun as a motivator. And that involves exploring boundaries and radical responsibility. And I've said the idea that, sharing is important. Sharing creates abundance. And when you share joy, it increases. When you share pain, it decreases. And also the ability to go anywhere, to create extreme comfort in any situation, to create luxury in any situation, and then to leave and leave no trace. And if you can do that, the whole world becomes a wellness destination. Every location becomes, any location becomes a really potent wellness destination, that you don't have to have the environmental impact and spend hundreds of millions of dollars building a fancy hotel and concrete and all of that. You can literally go into a pristine location, enjoy that, and then leave, and the next person can do that, and there's no ownership required, but there's curation required, there's governance that's required, there's a culture that's required, and that culture that goes through the hiking community or the rock climbing community or the festival community, or a culture of caring for each other, caring for community, caring for the planet, not leaving your waste around. All of these things need to be created. And the idea of adventure bathing creates possibilities in remote areas. So the last retreat I ran before the lockdown was in Bali, where we were setting up ice bars on the beach in Bali, and I've done other retreats in New Zealand where we set up hammocks and hot tubs on the top of a mountain or on a river valley, and doing hot tub hammocks or heated hammocks. So this allows, having a cold bath in a hot place or a hot bath in a cold place changes the perception of the place and makes it luxurious. And all you need to do is change the temperature of water and have a container for it, and you can actually create luxury at very, very low cost, but very, very high value. And there's a whole trend now, a global trend of mobile luxury. So I'm working now on the idea of a wild wellness circus, which are mobile wellness installations. So these are just some I've just pulled off the net. These aren't mine. So this is a mobile hot tub and sauna, another mobile hot tub. There are now all sorts of different tented, suspended tents that can really create extreme comfort in these seemingly inhospitable environments. And this technology can be low cost, portable, and easily shareable to create very, very high value experiences at very, very low cost, but that we need to account for, and we need to then incentivize and create value for that. The idea of having tented and hammock hotels. I know quite a lot of developments now, rather than building big hotel units, they're building tents, which reduces the permitting requirements, but they're still luxury. And it opens up these areas of the world that wouldn't otherwise be able to be visited with if you needed traditional hotels or other infrastructure to be built. And the idea of mobile saunas of various shapes and sizes, which means you can literally, the wood-fired mobile sauna, you can turn up to a public place on a beach or a river or a lake anywhere in the world and offer a really high value experience. And each community could have their own mobile sauna that they care for and look after, and it's a public good, but it's not necessarily provided by the council or the government. It's provided by the community for the community. And that needs some governance. So I'm really interested in the idea of having DAOs, distributed autonomous organizations, for governing local wellness installations that are managed by local communities. And the same sort of culture happens in Australia particularly, but now it's a festival culture is global, with the idea of bush doofs, where you can go into an area of bush in a cleared area and literally create a festival out of trucks and have this quite a focused community gathering and it's a celebratory gathering. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of interaction. There's a lot of learning that happens, but there's no high level infrastructure that's required, and you can pack it up and literally leave no trace. So then you can do it again and again. And we're still learning how, the festival community is learning how to do that and leave no trace, and creating the culture of, taking your waste home and doing all of that and looking after each other. But this is, I think, I love integrating things. So these cultures can be integrated to create a wellness culture that really does have a big impact. And the idea of the wellness circus, where you have mobile wellness installations, and that builds on the mutant vehicles from Burning Man. There's a great book that I've just received called the Anglerfish Sauna, how they built a sauna on a trailer that looks like an anglerfish, and that's the interior of the sauna you can see here. The steam comes out its tail, or the smoke from the sauna box comes out its tail. So having a fun element with a high value experience that then can be rewarded and incentivized. I'm working with groups now to purchase properties where we can set up workshops to build these installations and send them out into the community as a sort of a mobile wellness facility, as a wellness circus, to teach people, this is a wellness experience that you can actually do yourself at very low cost. And the idea that nature is medicine that can be shared, and these sort of, whether it's hot tubs or saunas, to bring that bathing culture in, can be put into nature, where you don't, as I say, you don't need this big, heavy infrastructure requirement, but you do need to be curated, doesn't need governance. You do need to, where's the wastewater going? How, are you polluting, the local environment? What is the impact on the local environment? So there still needs governance, but it doesn't need a corporate structure and a commercial structure. So there's a lot of ideas for integrating ideas for the experience economy. So I've talked a little bit about the bathing culture and wellness facilities, a little bit about food culture and growing and fermenting, and that can just be propagated throughout communities, and festival culture, which is communal fun. The idea of glamping with luxury anywhere. But one of the last things I want to just briefly touch on is citizen science and the idea of using our own data, where if you can share your personal health information with the community, as a community, you could all decide, let's all, or the group that has this particular condition, let's see if taking this particular therapy helps. And the community itself can design and implement a clinical trial that doesn't require, hundreds of millions of dollars and, pharmaceutical companies to fund it and all this approval process. The community itself can decide on the questions that are important to work out, what questions are important to us. Can we design a study, and can we implement that study within our community to then determine, an answer? So this is a really potent issue, because at the moment, your health data is worth a fortune to these big corporate interests, but it's also super valuable to your local community. And once you link your health data to your geography, you can start to map health and work out which are the places that are unhealthy and work out why they are unhealthy. And that has massive implications for real estate, for a whole lot of issues around the building industry and healthy homes, etc. So, I'm really passionate about leveraging these exponential technologies, so whether it's artificial intelligence and sensing technology, the use of geomedicine and spatially enabled devices, and big cloud, big data computing, crowdfunding and citizen science, where people can govern their own data and their own destiny and actually invest in projects that matter to them, whether it's a local wellness facility or if it's a clinical trial based on their own health condition. And the idea of using tokens and distributed or decentralized autonomous organizations to actually govern that, I think it's got massive potential for really having waves of viral happiness and waves of wellness to take over the world. So yeah, I like the idea of waves of viral happiness could spark a wellness pandemic that turns the whole world into a wellness wonderland. And there are different levels of engagement. So, you can know about it, or maybe you don't even know about it at all. And that might be, some wellness practice, whether it's ice bathing or fermenting food or whatever. So there's a level of knowledge where you either know about it or don't know. Then you're interested. So, you're willing to find out, but you never tried it. Then you try it. Then you actually use or practice it. And then you master it and you teach it, and you actually contribute to it in your own community. So these different levels of engagement can be tokenized with different levels of practice, whether, as I say, hot and cold bathing. I know in Australia, I know groups that set up ice bars on the beach, and every once a week, once a fortnight, they all come together in a public place. I know other groups that set up dance parties in the bush, and they just say, okay, as a group, let's just go there. We'll set up our own speakers, and it's all portable. And yeah, you bypass a lot of the current governance systems and the current commercial systems to create one that's really controlled by the community. So I just want to end by saying, where attention goes, energy flows. I've written they've been called children's books. These two books, Bing and Bang Begin and The Beautiful Mare, they're actually really profound adult books that are accessible to children. And the book Bing and Bang Begin contains a lot of knowledge from thermodynamics and Eastern cosmology and mindfulness and evolution and human physiology. And it talks about, something, anything, nothing, everything, and thinking. And thinking can imagine whatever goes on. Something can be right or something can be wrong. And wherever thinking's attention span goes, things are created and energy flows. So I think, having cryptocurrencies and the blockchain to then guide our thinking is a really powerful combination. And it's just like, how do we do it? And they're sort of the questions I'm posing. I've written, if people are interested, I've written a pandemic survival guide, which has a lot of my poetry and a lot of hints on how to be healthy and protocols for treating and preventing different illnesses. It's freely downloadable on my website, drmark.co/guide. And now I'd like to just throw it open because I think there's so much that we could talk about, and I'm really interested to know how this community can interact with that information. Oh, is my video on? I can't see myself. That's all right.
No, we can't see you either, Mark.
Oh, I don't know why you could see my share screen there. Yeah, I hope.
Yes, we could see your share screen.
Otherwise, I've been talking with I'll stop video. That's really weird that I can't see my video. It hasn't happened to me before. Choose video filter.
That's all right. We can open up the floor while you see if you can decode your Zoom. So yeah, thank you so much for a tremendous presentation. Very, very substance dense with some very powerful ideas and some beautiful poetry, I might add. And yeah, it sort of gives rise to lots of thoughts and considerations. But the one thing I was very curious about, this notion that when you take hot temperatures to cold climates or cold temperatures to hot climates, you create luxury. I thought that was a very interesting observation to see how, the power of contrast creates novelty. And you pointed that out in the creation of contrast in the body, where you shock the body in a way where you experience an extreme temperature, where the body actually feels potentially threatened, and yet that generates an immune response which is health giving. And so I was just wondering if you could maybe comment or explore that idea of how, what happens with contrast.
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. I've created a whole wellness practice around what I call extreme wellness, where you actually visit the extremes of your physiology. And there are five main dimensions of your physiology, which are the 5 elements of life and the 5 elements of photosynthesis and respiration, which is water, glucose, oxygen, temperature, and carbon dioxide. So they're the 5 elements that control all of life. And you can experience, the extremes of water, dehydration and hydration, of glucose, feasting and fasting, of oxygen by over hyperventilating or holding your breath, of temperature by doing hot and cold, and carbon dioxide by activity, very little activity or lots of activity. And I've got this practice or prescription, extreme wellness prescription, where you filter and flush your bladder, you feast and fast your bowel, you pant and hold your breath, you do hot and cold with your body, and you do everything in flow. So you're in a flow state, and then you do nothing at all, actively do nothing with your brain. And by visiting those extremes, what it allows you to do is practice being resilient, but then it also helps you experience the midpoint of homeostasis in the middle. And there's a saying in Eastern philosophy that the greatest movement comes from the stillest point. So it's by visiting your extremes, it allows you to really deeply explore that midpoint in between those extremes. And that's, I guess, a familiar example would be in a yoga class where, you do the shavasana, the relaxation at the end of the class, and you get a much more profound relaxation because you've moved your body through the extremes of movement and you've exercised. But even when you're doing that, when you go to the edge of your stretch, so you're stretching a different part of your body, at the end of that stretch, your body tells you, don't go any further or you're going to hurt yourself. So your mind gets direct, immediate feedback from your body. And at that point, if you just breathe and focus, you can tolerate that extreme stretch, okay. But if you did try and push further, you'd hurt yourself and you'd actually limit your flexibility. But if you just every day go and visit the edge of your comfort zone with that stretch, and then when you get to that stretch, you just do 2 or 3 breaths and practice being relaxed, because when you're stretching like that, you're stressed. It's quite stressful. But if you practice being relaxed under that stress and you do that regularly, you'll find that your range of motion will naturally expand by itself. And that's a really powerful metaphor for when you just expand any part of your life, and it's going to the point of what I call being comfortably uncomfortable. So you don't want to overstretch and be uncomfortably uncomfortable and be injured, but you want to be comfortably uncomfortable. So you're in this stressful situation and you can relax and practice relaxing. And then when you do that, you find you've expanded your physiological range and your resilience. And that translates to the rest of your life when there's a stress that's out of your control. So practicing being stressed and putting stress on your body, and whether that's running or hot and cold or breathing and hyperventilation or breath holding, whatever, they're all really powerful ways of expanding your physiology. And I'm really interested to bring that to people. And I've done it before. I've done some tours. I actually traveled with Wim Hof when Wim Hof was in Australia and gave lectures about the science behind the Wim Hof method. But also I've done retreats and tours where we've set up ice bars in public locations or in a conference room, and got people to sit for 2 minutes in an ice bath. And people are blown away the fact that they can even do it. And when you do it, you get this incredible endorphin rush, and people feel very powerful having done that. And just having people get that experience, it really opens them up to other things in their life. And we're also tapping into existing cultures, because there is, the Scandinavians and the Japanese had this culture of, you go to the sauna and then you go out of the sauna and you roll in the snow. So it's already something that's been established.
Sounds like you've given some contemplation to this idea of tokenization as a kind of an extension of crowdfunding, the emerging models of crowdfunding. I'm just wondering if you'd like to touch on that a little bit while we're having that discussion.
Yeah, well, so I'm looking at the moment, there's a whole lot of different properties that are up for sale. I think there's lots of health retreats around the world have gone broke, and they're being sold. And I'm looking for models where we can get a community to purchase into that property. And so it needs investment, but then that property can be used to educate people to go out into their own communities and run the wellness circuits, or to build equipment and build trailers and mobile equipment that we can then go and set up and send it out into the rivers and lakes and beaches and communal places, and then trying to get people to then look after that equipment, or empower people in their own communities to do it themselves. So it's not even us doing it, because anyone can go and do that. And that's sort of an extension, because while I've been a professor for 30 years, I've gone back into medical practice, and going back into telehealth medical practice, you realize that a lot of what you do is, government bureaucracy, taking notes and writing scripts and stuff. Although I don't really write, I write scripts for medical cannabis, and that's about it. But a lot of what you do is repetitive, because you're telling people the same things over and over again. So I thought, I wrote this pandemic survival guide as a something I could just share with all my patients. So I don't have to keep repeating that information. But then having some sort of system where people could become a membership group, where they would share information, but they'd share the culture. And I know a lot of my patients, because I'm doing telehealth, I've got patients from literally all over the world, but mostly all around Australia. And often they feel very isolated. So I'm trying to work out, how do we empower people in a local community that maybe they have a sauna at home, or maybe they've got a blow-up hot tub they don't mind setting up once a week and inviting people to come and share it with them. But they want to invite people who are part of their culture, and how do they find those people? So to trying to create an online group that has similar values that can then, so it's a virtual group, but that then actually manifest real world experiences and real world human connection that involves these wellness practices. And that could be even, sharing a SCOBY, or make, I've got a herb garden, I'll take a cutting of my herbs, and when you come to my house, I'll give you a cutting, and you go and take that and you plant that, and then you give that away to your friends. So there's a lot of these practices that at the moment they're not valued, but they need to be. And I'm really struggling with how do we value these things that are for free? Because if I give you a kombucha SCOBY, it doesn't deplete me. My SCOBYs keep on growing and growing and growing. But then if for some reason mine dies and I've given it to you, then I can get some back from you, and it's sort of like I've banked some with you. So by giving it away, it actually makes me richer. And there's a lot of these practices that when you give them away, you actually become richer. But it seems our whole economy has been the reverse of that. It's about creating scarcity, and me trying to hodl and focus on what I've got, and then get more from you, rather than me giving to you and making myself richer through giving rather than receiving.
Yeah, it's a great case example to just point out that something that continues to sustain itself and continue to create so much exponential value is something that's actually really undervalued, and whereas anything that's scarce is considered valued. And it's a really novel observation, and how things are a little bit upside down. I wanted to touch on the mobile sauna idea, because it's a very, and you mentioned the idea of it being community owned, because it sounded like a really great concept for tokenization, how a local community could all take a stake and participate in the production of a mobile sauna that could be moved around anywhere. I wonder if you could expand on that model.
Yeah, well, I mean, so there's some really beautiful mobile saunas. I think I show you, I think I had a photo here of them. I don't know if you still got my share going, of this, this anglerfish sauna, which looks like an anglerfish, but it's it's an art piece. But if you look on the internet, there's all these do-it-yourself mobile sauna projects. How people who are handymen or handy people can just create them themselves. And to do that, I mean, you need to have it off the grid. So if it's wood fired, so there's certain parts of the world where that's not appropriate. But a lot of the world where it is, where that can be a community asset rather than an individual asset, and depending on the council and the zoning. But in a lot of places, it's not illegal just to go up and pull up your trailer to a public place, and you could set up a facility and offer, a really high quality experience for people who've just come out of the lake or the river or the beach, or they're up at the snow in the car park, and offer essentially what would be a 5-star luxury, spa service as part of a community service, and as part of a wellness community activity. And I think that's, as I say, it's really undervalued at the moment. I know people that are doing it, and I've experimented with doing it myself to some level, and it's been highly successful whenever we've done it. But in terms of finding out a way to govern that, to get the locations where you actually build that equipment, and there is some training involved when, if you're doing public bathing, there's levels of hygiene, and there's some contraindications, and if you're dealing with powerful forces, when you're dealing with heat, because you are playing with really powerful physiological forces, that there is some care that needs to be, and some level of common sense safety that needs to be implemented. So these are the issues that keep coming up, and how do you implement that common sense safety? How do you get a community managed asset that the vandals aren't going to come and destroy it, because people have pride in it, and there's some level of oversight and governance, and it's not going to destroy the environment, it's going to enhance the environment. So looking after whether it's the firewood or the waste ashes, or making sure that there's no rubbish left around. So these are things that the community need to deal with, and I think these are really important discussions for us to have if we're going to create wellness. And as I say, wellness really needs to be part of a culture. It's not something I have as an individual. So the more I can engage other people in that, the more powerful it becomes for everybody.
Just had an idea, the idea of actually creating using a pyrolysis technology to create a sauna, where you're actually creating a hot environment for people and producing fuel at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, you can create hot environment. You can create not just the sauna, but you could be making the sauna, heating your hot tub, heating your a big pot of soup, and having steam for your cappuccino machine, or your coffees, or whatever it is. So there's really efficient rocket stove designs and other designs to do that. And I really love the idea of research and do it yourself, where you can put up plans on the internet, and then people can modify them, and then they'll change them and adjust them based on their own experience. And I think there's a lot of creative innovation that can happen that way, that wouldn't necessarily happen if it's just as a commercial profit-making enterprise.
In the short time that we have left, I just want to invite Joe to ask his question. Joe, are you there?
Yep.
Great, you had a question.
Hey, Mark. Yeah, so I just wanted to ask you, growing up and or along the way, what most inspired you to kind of get involved with this, with wellness and the really amazing work that you're doing?
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. Well, it's pretty great question, but it's very simple. I mean, fun. Like really, my whole life is about finding the fun, and I realized very early on that being well was more fun than being ill, because you can have a lot more fun when you're well than you're ill. And that led me to study Western medicine, and then I spent 38 years at university, which is a lot longer than most, doing Western medicine and Chinese medicine. I did 2 PhDs, one in Chinese medicine, one in electrical computer systems engineering. And then I spent 18 years or 16 years as a professor, really championing wellness as an academic discipline. But it was actually a lot more fun going to wellness conferences than these other specialist conferences, and studying all these things like yoga and organic food and meditation and detoxification and health retreats and spas and saunas. This has been I've had an incredible career, doing research in these areas. So I've been really fun driven, and often people think fun is frivolous, but I actually think the pursuit of fun is a spiritual practice, and fun requires both your left and your right hemisphere to be engaged. And it also involves you learning, because often fun is where you're at the edge of your psychological comfort zone, and you're expanding it in a way that is integrative rather than destructive. So yes,
Mark,
fun is a big motivator.
Yeah, it's a lovely answer to a really terrific question. Thank you, Joe. We've just run out of time, and I can see that Angie's got a question. But I just wanted to invite you, if you'd like to continue the discussion with Mark. Mark, I've just created a little breakout room there. So if you'd like to, anyone who'd like to join the breakout room and have a chat with Mark, they're welcome to do so. Thank you so much, Mark, for a very rich and edifying discussion about all things wellness. And I'm looking forward to exploring how we can